One of the reasons why your wedding photography business may be in chaos and you have such a hard time growing it is because you're not doing something like this. And I know this so well because, well, I didn't always do this, and when I started implementing things like this, it changed things for me. I'm Luke Cleland, I'm a wedding photographer, and I very much am a self-taught photographer. I taught myself everything about photography and business. I probably taught myself too much about business because I knew absolutely nothing when I started my business. I knew I loved photography, I loved taking photos of people, and I thought that would be enough to kind of make me a successful wedding photographer. But that's not necessarily true. Just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean that you're good at running a business of that said thing. And it wasn't until I was exposed to a book called The E-Myth that my whole mindset around being a wedding photographer and a photographer in general is that you need to not only work in your business, which is taking photos of people, doing the editing, responding to emails, booking clients, but you need to work on your business. You need to imagine yourself as a CEO and step out of the daily to-dos and all of the tasks that you need to do and look down at your business and say, what needs to happen in my business for this to be functioning properly as a business and not just as a photographer? I think this is a problem for so many of us. It was a huge problem for me because I went to art school. I wasn't a business person. I loved the art side of photography. I loved the personal interactions of photography. I knew nothing about business. My first year of doing taxes as a self-employed person, I asked my accountant how much my return was, and he laughed at me because he thought I was joking. But no, I was not joking. I was serious because I thought tax time, you just get this money from the government and they give it to you. And you're like, thanks for that extra money, government. But no, I didn't realize that you actually had to pay taxes. So that was my very first IRS bill. Now, one of the first things after reading that book that I implemented in my business was I stepped back, I looked at my business, and I was like, okay, what are some stress points for me? What are some things that make me worried? What things that are kind of holding me back as I run my business? And one of the things was that when it came up to a wedding day, I would often either maybe forget something or frantically be putting my bag together and be really stressed. And then I would show up at the wedding day kind of stressed because the morning was really stressful because I was trying to pack all these things. And I was like, did I miss anything? Did I forget anything? So I did this thing right here. This is just a checklist of all the things that I need to do and I need to have in my bag ready to go in order to shoot a wedding day. It is these kind of systems that free up your brain instead of stressing about do I have everything? Did I pack the right amount of batteries and the right amount of lenses, whatever? It frees your brain up from thinking about that so that you can think about things, prepping as you go into the wedding day. You can think about, okay, how am I going to, shoot the groom getting ready? What kind of flat lays and details am I going to do? And this kind of concept and idea of making lists like this and kind of formalizing things that you do in your business are called systems. Now, this is just a kind of a very simple system, but when you start putting some of these things together, that's when you free up your brain of thinking about the same thing over and over again, so you can use more of that brain capacity to think about how you can grow your business. So I thought about just giving this PDF for you to download, but it actually would be a little irrelevant because all of you are gonna have, different equipment and stuff that you're packing. So instead, I'm just gonna actually read you through some of the things that you should have on your own list. And before your next wedding, sit down and spend the time to type out each of the things that you put in your camera bag. And so I just run through this list. I literally print off one for each wedding that I do, and I go and I check off each one as I put it in my bag or as I double check that it's in my bag. But before I get to the gear, the first thing that I actually like to do is write some information down about the wedding that I'm about to do, right? So I always write the name of the couple, because sometimes you have a couple weddings in a weekend maybe, and you're like, wait, are they Jen and Ryan or Jen and Scott? Like, it's easy to mix up some names, especially if there's some similar ones. So I write their names nice and big at the top of this thing so that I like remember, okay, which wedding am I at here, and making sure that I have everyone straight. And then this like beginning top section is all about logistics of getting to the venue on time, and even making sure that I'm up on time when I should set my alarm. So I put the couple, I put their date, I have a slot that says wake up time. When do I need to get out of bed so that I have enough time to leave? Because even things like that just like make me stressed. But when I fill this thing out, I just take a quick look at it and like, okay, I need to set my alarm, super early this morning, or like I don't even need to technically wake up till noon, even though I have a child. So we are up far before noon. And then I write things down like, what time do I need to arrive at the first location with my buffer time that I like to have. So I like to have a buffer time of at least 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, depending on where it is. And so ahead of time, before the day of, I add in those extra time slots so that I don't have to think. The morning of the wedding, I'm all go town into shooting, and I'm not trying to figure out the logistics. Even something as simple as just like, where is the first location? Now, why this also is such a good exercise is that, I do send a questionnaire to my couple to get all their final details before the wedding day. But sometimes like one of these things could, slip through. Maybe they send you the name of the location, or maybe they say the groom's house or something, but then they forget to put the address down. So some of these things have come from my experience where I want to like double check. I want to make sure that I have like the actual date and location, for example. So when I'm doing this a few days ahead of time, I can confirm all those things. Okay. So then it goes into like all of the details, the gear list, right? This is stuff like load SD cards, check that there's batteries in the camera, check that I have my 6 backup batteries, and I go through all of the stuff. And I even have something that's important to put in is that I like to make sure and reset all of my cameras before every single wedding day. So I go through and I go through and make sure that my cameras are synced, so they have all the same time under the menu, so that when I'm taking photos with multiple cameras, or I have multiple photographers using my cameras, that all of the photos are synced, right? And they're not like at different times. So when you pull them into Lightroom, it's like, what is going on? And then even things like making sure that my white balance is set to the appropriate kelvins, that I like to actually set all my settings back to like what I like to think is my factory settings, which is I like to have mine starting at ISO 400. I have it at 1/25 of a second, and then I usually put down the aperture of the lens down to the lowest that it offers. So on here, the example is 1.8. This is really important, especially if you have a mirrorless camera, is I make sure that my standby timers aren't too long. So for example, I like to use my camera for video. And when I'm doing that, I turn on my standby timers, my, auto shut off, and I turn it on to like 10 minutes, right? So it doesn't automatically turn off when I'm setting up a shot. But for weddings, I like to have that like way down. Like I like to have like 30 seconds or a minute for some of those standby timers, because otherwise it will completely drain your battery. A couple other things that I want to mention are like, I make sure to double check that my camera is set to RAW. Even though I like literally never take it off RAW, I just never want to like get home and see that I shot a whole wedding on JPEG. So these are just things that like bother my little brain, and I want to make sure that I have just checked it off. I've looked at it and I've checked it off physically, and that puts me at ease so that I don't have to think about all of these silly things when I show up for the first part of the wedding day. And then the most of the rest of the list is just all of the stuff that I need, right? I want to make sure that my drone is there, that I have a light stand, a light pouch, my Peak Design clips, all of these things, and then get down to the last few ones. I think this is also important if you want to include this in your own, is that like I make sure that I print off the questionnaire that I send off to my couple, so I have all of their information. But then I also make sure that I print off the schedule and I print off the family photo lists. I have a little checkbox to make sure that there's Advil or Tylenol in my thing. Like I've always gotten headaches throughout my life. So I want to make sure that I'm not at a wedding with like a pounding headache and I have nothing, because you can't just like run around and say like, does anyone have Advil for me? I'm going to pass out. That would be weird. Second last one I have on here is that I add my schedule to Google Calendar. So a little personal rule that I have for myself and also for any seconds that I hire is that I do not want phones out ever. If I use my phone or I have seconds using phone, I ask them to like go to the bathroom or go somewhere hidden. So I never want to be seen on a wedding day going like this. Even if we're looking through the schedule, when someone sees you do that, they don't assume that you're like looking at the schedule. They assume that you're looking on Instagram, and I 100% don't want to be seen or someone to assume that we're like doom scrolling over here. And then the last one is mine. It says, take backup hard drive offsite. And so this is a part of my little reminder that I have a backup of all my hard drives, and especially the current year that I'm working on. And this is the part of the workflow where I take the hard drive out of my office and put it at my home. And so that's just like a nice little time to remind me to rotate so that I always have a backup of my photos and my current photos somewhere else. So I have one here at my office, and then I also have a copy at my house. So take some of these suggestions, take some things that either stress you out or problems that you've come across, and type them out onto a paper like this and print it off at every wedding that you do. I don't know about you, but like for me, in order to print something out like this or type it out, I always felt like it was a waste of time, and it was kind of hard for me to do it. But let me tell you, when you start doing things like this in your business, when you start formalizing things and creating systems, man, I will tell you, it just gets me so excited about my business, because it doesn't feel just like this like pieced together photography ramshackle. I don't even know what that means. It makes you feel legit. It makes you feel like a business. It makes you feel prepared so that when you show up on a wedding day, you are ready to be the photographer and you're not stressed and worried about all of these details. So hopefully that helps. I'd love to hear if this inspired you to make one of your own. So speaking of which, I just printed this off because I have a wedding to prep for in 2 days. So I'm gonna go find all these things and then check it all off so I can sleep like a little baby tonight. Okay, bye.